So we'll be covering it from the in a very practical manner. So let us take the case that you want to launch a new product. Okay, so let's take the case that you are a electronic manufacturing company, and further you want to launch a new product and you want to analyze the market. In that particular case, let us take the case that there are 10 lakh people in the state itself, where basically your suggested market it is, there are basically residing 10 lakh people over here. Now these 10 lakh people will be called what? These will be termed as population. No, either way it is that you will be going to each and every people in the market itself, and further we'll be looking at that what are the different scenarios that you can market your product. Okay, so because we will be taking a survey, so it will be the case that we'll be going to each and every person, we'll be covering 10 lakh people, and further we'll be performing the survey, but that would be quite hectic and also a very costlier concern. So we will be doing what? We'll be selecting a small selection, or we can say we'll be selecting a small part of the population itself, and further we'll be conducting the survey over here. Now this small portion or small cut that we have selected out of the population of 10 lakh people, it is said to be what? It is said to be sample. So the process that by which we do select the different entities from the population itself, that is said to be what? That is said to be the sampling. So over there you need to understand the different terms. First of all, it is related to population. So whensoever we are basically concerned related to the mean of the population, it is represented by term mu. It is basically written as mu as such, and its sound is mu. And in case you are basically concerned about the mean of the terms, in that case you'll be basically writing it as x bar over there. So the mean is basically represented in the case of the sample as x bar. In the case of population, it is represented by mu over there. Now what do you mean by the mean over there? Let me give you another example. Let us take the case that there are 50 students in the class. And you want to get the average height. Calculate the average height. That would be related to what? You'll be calculating what? You'll be calculating the mean. That is, if I'm considering this as population, it will be represented by what? It will be represented by mu itself, and it will equal to individual height of each student, that is S1, S2 up to S50, and further dividing it by the number of the students, that is 50 over here. That will be the mean value over here in the case of the population. Same way you can calculate the mean for the sample itself. Let us take the case that out of these 50 students, I selected a sample of 10 students and further calculated the mean value. It will be represented by x bar in that particular case. Is that clear? Further, it is related to, in the case of population, whether we are considering it related to the mean or standard deviation, these are said to be what? These are said to be the parameters. These are said to be what? These are said to be the parameters related to the characteristics of the population, are basically said to be the parameters. Whereas in the case of we are considering the mean and standard deviation or standard error in the case of the sample, it is said to be statistics. Okay, so let me give an example related to it. For first of all, we are considering it related to population. So for population, mean is represented as mu, and further in the case of a sample itself, it is represented by x bar. When we talk about the standard deviation, it is represented by sigma. It is represented as sigma in the case of population, and further for sample, it is represented by small s, or we simply write as a sigma x bar, Any of these can be used for this purpose. Is that clear? Further, for the population, we name these as, whether we are talking about the median or mean or standard deviation, we basically call them what? We call them parameters. Okay, we call them parameters of the population, and in the case of sample, we basically name them as statistics of the population. Statistics of the population itself, of the sample itself. Is that clear? That was related to the terminology that we use over there, because it will be quite helpful to you so as to understand when we'll be covering the numerical part, and further when we'll be covering the theoretical part too. Okay, now the question is that how we are going to select the sample out of the population. There are many ways which are over there by which we can select the sample out of the population. Now it's not an easier task, because whatsoever whatsoever the sample you will be selecting, that must be quite sufficient enough, and that must be covering each and every aspect related to population. Now, what is the main purpose of selecting the sample? Because we want to save our time as well as the cost related to it, and further we want to cover each and every aspect related to the population too. So if you are an electronic company and if you want to conduct a survey in the market, definitely you are basically quite sure you basically do want to cover each and every aspect related to market, that the sample must be representing the population itself. Okay, so that you must be accurate. So we basically are covering the different scenarios, and I'll just let you know that what is standard deviation and how you can find out the differences related to it. But before that, we'll be covering that what are the different types of the sampling, and further the sampling is divided, that the way of sampling is covered in two different categories. One it is a judgment sampling. We are basically now covering the type of sampling, and further what it is a judgment sampling, and it is basically what it is a non-random sampling. It is a judgment sampling, or also said to be the non-random sampling, where the person who is basically selecting the sample will be having a judgment related to the population itself, and based upon his perceptions, based upon his judgment, he will be selecting the entities out of the population itself. That is basically what that is a judgment sampling or non-random sampling. And the second one, it is a random sampling. Random sampling, where we'll be selecting the entities on a random basis. And in case of random sampling, each and every in general, if we say in case of random sampling, each and every entity will be having the equal chance of getting selected into the sample itself. But in the case of the judgment sampling, it will not be the same. Let me make you understand with an example. Let us say that there are 100 students, and further, if you are having a judgment related to the students, in that case you will be just considering or focusing on some particular students itself. You will not be covering each and every 100 student now. Each and every of the 100 students, you will be basically considering and focusing only on a number of the students out of 100. But in case of random sampling, we will be selecting the students randomly. In that case particularly, each and every student will be having an equal chance so as to be selected in the sample itself. Is that clear? Is that particular part clear over here? Now, random sampling is further of 4 types. Random sampling is a further of 4 types. What are those 4 types? Let us have a look at it. What are those 4 types? Let us have a look at it. Now, over here we are the type related to the simple random sampling. First of all, it is related to the simple random sampling. It is simple random sampling. In that case, you'll be basically looking at each and every outcome that can be there, and then you'll be selecting out of those pairs. Okay, let us take the case that you are having the 4 students. And we want to pick 2 out of these. We are having 4 students named A, B, C, D, and we want to pick 2 out of these 4 students. And what would be the different events that can be there? I'll just say it as event, that what can be the different pairs related to 2 students. If I want to select 2 students, the 2 different pairs can be, the different combinations can be 4C2. How we can solve 4C2? It is basically equal to 4 factorial divided by 2 factorial. So how we can solve it at 4 into 3 into 2 factorial divided by 2 factorial into 2 factorial. So it will be 6 events can be there, 6 combinations can be there, and those combinations will be equal to AB, AC, AD, BC, BD, and further CD. These 6 combinations can be there, and if we want to select one combination out of it, what would be the probability related to it? Probability is basically equal to what? The outcomes, expected outcomes, that is over here 1, because we want to select only one pair of the students over here. So we want, either we'll be selecting AB, or we'll be selecting AC or AD, or BC, BD, or CD. Okay, so that is basically one event only. And what is the total number of the events over there? There are 6 events. So that will be the probability related to selecting a pair out of 4 students. And what will be the probability related to selection of person A over here, or person B over here, person C over here, person D over here? Now look at the particular events over here. In this particular case, you will be analyzing that each and every student is appearing thrice in the combinations. Okay, so out of 6 events, each and every student is basically repeating thrice in the system itself. Likewise, if we look at the person A over here, that the combinations are AB, AC, AD. So what would be the probability of selection of person A? What would be the probability of selection of person A? Total events are 6, and further A is basically over there in 3 events, so it will be 3 by 6, so it will be 1 by 2 probability. So it will be 1 by 2 probability. So here we can just want to tell you that each and every person is having the equality related to be selected in the sample itself. That is said to be what? That is said to be the simple random sampling, where without any judgment, without any prior notice or related to the student itself or related to the sample itself, entities itself, we will be selecting our candidates, our sample without any biasness. Is that clear? That is a simple random sampling. Second type of the random sampling, it is a systematic sampling. It is a systematic sampling itself. Now what is systematic sampling? Now in this case also, you basically select the person randomly, but you will be following a system. You will be following what? You will be following a system. Let us take the case that we are having 100 of the students, 1 2 3 4 6 5 7 5 6 7 8 9 10 and up to 100 and further let us take the case that we selected each and every 8th student. We selected each and every 8th student. Likewise, we selected the student at number 8. First of all, we basically numbered the students, or basically allotted a number to the student, and further after that we selected what? We selected a student. Okay, we selected a particular student. In this case, we are assuming that we selected person each and every 8th student over here. As such, we selected 8th student, 16th student, 24th, 32nd student, and so on. Okay, so such that we basically selected each and every student as a multiple of 8 over here. Okay, now in this particular case, person up to 1 to 7, basically they never got a chance to be selected into the sample itself. Okay, so never, in that particular case also, they never got a chance that they will be selected into the sample itself, because we basically selected each and every 8th student over here. So that is related to what? We are following the system, but the limitation is related to that there is no equal chance that is given to that. That was basically over there in the case of the simple random sampling. Then why will not be going for the simple random sampling? Why will not be using the simple random sampling? Because when we consider the case of 4 students, the possible events were 6. Now let us take an example where we are having 1 lakh a number of the entities in the sample, where we are having 1 lakh entities in the sample itself. In that case, it could be very much costlier and time taking so as to get the particular outcomes. Okay, so that we basically do not go for the simple random sampling, where we are having a large number of the entities in the sample itself. Okay, third type of the sampling that we are going to cover, it is related to what? It is related to the stratified sampling or mixed sampling. Third type that we are going to cover over here, it is a stratified sampling. It is a stratified sampling, or we also name it as a mixed sampling over here. Now what are the stratas actually? Now let me give an example that if you're a gene manufacturing company, and if you want to get an idea that what would be your estimated sales this year, and you also know that your gene products are very much famous under the age groups of 16 to 35. Okay, now you basically divided each of the whole of the population into the different categories. Let us take the case that you basically categorize those as 1 to 15 years, then 16 to 30 years, 30 to 35 years, and 35 plus years. Okay, so that is the basically different categories you formed, and further you formed the different stratas. You basically formed the different stratas. You basically put up the each and every different age groups into the different groups over there. You basically made different groups related to that is related to what? Those are termed as stratas. Now if you look at these stratas particularly individually, you can basically locate as these individual entities over here in particular group. Those would be related to each other. Those will be having common characteristics. Okay, because we are considering related to different age groups over here. So their habits, their eating habits, their wearing habits, their fashion habits all must be very much very much relatable to each other. Those must be very much relatable to each other. So we can say there are homogeneous. The internal or the groups are basically itself, the internal or the entities into the group, into the strata itself, they will be homogeneous in nature. If we are having 100 students or 4,000 people over here in age 1 to 15, and for the 40,000 over here in 35 plus, in that case we can consider that the entities present in particular strata, the characteristics would be homogeneous. The characteristics would be homogeneous. Okay, so now the population is divided into what? It is divided into different parts and further having different characteristics. Now each and every strata will be heterogeneous with each other. These will be heterogeneous to each other, because if we basically compare these two different stratas, those would be different from each other. But if we compare the different entities in one strata itself, those will be sharing common characteristics. Is that clear to you? Okay, so first of all, you do what? You basically form the different stratas, different groupings, and further you divided the people into different groups over there, and then you basically selected the different candidates out of the stratas itself. That type of sampling is said to be what? It is said to be stratified sampling. It is said to be the stratified sampling. Why stratified samplings? Because we formed different stratas. We formed the different stratas in this case. And the next type we are going to cover, it is over here, that is related to what? That is related to the cluster sampling. The fourth type that we are going to cover over here is cluster sampling. Now cluster sampling is totally opposite to that of the stratified sampling. Why it is opposite? Let us have a look at it. So let us take the case that the company took the map of the city and further divided into the different groupings. Now this is a G1, this is G2, or we can say cluster C1, C2, C3, C4 and so on. Okay, now if we look at the particular cluster over here, now there will be different people residing over here in one cluster. Okay, we can basically take an example that if the city is divided into the different colonies or different mohallas over there, in that particular case, different category of the people with the different attributes and different characteristics will be residing over there. So we can say there is heterogeneity in the cluster itself. If we look at some particular cluster, there will be heterogeneity, that the characteristics are not similar, because each and every type of persons, each and every type of people is residing over there in singular in individual cluster over there. But if we look at if we basically compare two different clusters, let us take the case if we are comparing cluster 1 with cluster 2, in that case there will not be that much deviation. The deviation will not be that much. Deviation means what? Deviation means differences between the characteristics or differences between the means would not be that much. That is related to what? But in the case of the stratified sampling, we basically considered that inside of particular strata there was homogeneous, those were homogeneous. Okay, but in case of clusters, the inside of the cluster we are having those are heterogeneous. Okay, so clusters basically are having the heterogeneity, but when we compare the different clusters, those are comparable. Okay, so that is related to what? That is related to cluster sampling over here. So these are the four types related to the random sampling. So we are having two types of sampling, that is judgment sampling or non-random sampling, and second one, it is related to the random sampling over here. Further we covered the four types: simple random sampling and systematic sampling. Third one, it was stratified sampling, and the fourth one, it is the cluster sampling over there. Is that clear over here? So kindly please do confirm at the earliest so that we could proceed.